Hi, I'm Arden Lobb, and this is the fourth video on setting up a little chat app for the mobile app development class at Strathclyde. Previously, we've looked at the server side, we've looked at reading posts continuously, we've added posts to the server, so we now have a little app. It doesn't look great, but we'll do that in the next video, and we can add messages to this. So add new message, post that, and it appears in the chat. That's grand. Except, what if we lose the data connection? Because you know what it's like with mobile connections. You've got a great 4G connection. No, you don't. Yes, you do. No, you don't. Oh, you've got an H. No, you don't. Yes, you do. No, you don't. Network connections come and go continuously, especially if you're on the move or in your poor reception area. So it's bad to assume that if we connect to a server, we get the data back. The code we've written is kind of okay in that it handles it, because we get a response back from the server saying it's bad, and if it's not a good response, we just ignore it. But the code we've written assumes that the post will go ahead. It doesn't try to do anything about it. So how do we solve this? Well, there's a couple of ways of solving this. The first is we send a message with a unique ID. We've already set that up. The server replies with that unique ID, and the server ignores duplicate IDs. So that's all set up for us. That's how we set up the server, and we've already done the unique message ID in the last video. We set that up as a random thing. So what we now need to look at is repeatedly sending each message until we get an acknowledgement. We have to think about when to give up, we have to think about how many tries, what to do in a failure, but for now, we'll keep it simple. So this is the model. It's purely to do with the model, nothing to do with the view or the controller. So it's a nice part of the model view controller approach. I'm going to create a post queue variable. And my idea here is I'm going to stick things in a queue and then add them to the queue and remove them from the queue. Okay, after we've got an acknowledgement back. So the post queue is a new. These are a bit tricky to handle in JavaScript. We're using associative arrays, and JavaScript syntax is a bit, well, kind of lacking really. So we create a new array, and we're just going to tag that as an empty associative array as a queue of messages to be sent. Okay, and my idea now is that, so post is our function that we've tied in with the server, with the model view controller, the controller. Okay, and what this currently does is it sends the message. I'm going to take all that out. Okay, and instead of that, I'm going to put in a to-do saying add to the queue. Okay, and then up here as a local function, I'm going to add do send post. Okay. Takes a message and it does that. So I just pasted that back in there. Okay. Except I'm going to make a little change to it, and I'm going to put the UUID in here as a second parameter. Okay, so we now have a do send post, which is equal to a function that takes a message and a UUID, and that sends the message to the server. Okay, we have to do a couple of things. We have to poll for messages, so we need another function that will check if there's new messages. So let's do a check and send is equal to a function. And we'll just add a to-do note here. So the idea is that whenever we post a message, all we do is we add it to the queue. We then have a check and send which runs regularly. So we can set that as a set interval. check and send, maybe every 5 seconds. It checks to see if there's anything still in the queue, and if there is, it posts them. We'll also do the same trick that we did for posting messages, that we'll do a quick update if we do a post. So the post message now is just to add it to the queue. So we've got our post queue. With associative arrays, you can add them by string. So I'm going to add the get UUID as the ID of the string element. So that's the index into the array. And I'm going to set that equal to the message. Okay. And then I'm going to do this the same trick as we did in the previous video, that I'm going to say check and send within 100 milliseconds of us adding it to the queue, just to return control to the browser for a second, and then get it back and call the function to check the queue. Okay, so instead of handling it all in one event, we split it up into a couple of timer events. So the post queue, that's actually a bit of an issue because that's a number, and with associative arrays they're indexed by string. You don't want to be indexing them by number because you start getting into complications with traditional arrays. Best thing to do is just append the empty string, and that forces it to be a string. So we've got post queue, so that's post add to the queue. Add the message to the queue. So we've got post queue, quote, get user ID equals the message. So we're adding that to the queue with the associative array with the string of the message ID. And then we do a check and send. Okay. So let's look at check and send. First thing we've got to do is work out how many messages we have in the queue, and that's not easy. The associative arrays make that rather hard in Java. There is a function of object though, which will tell you the keys that are in an associative array. So we get the keys that are in post queue and check the length of that. Unfortunately, you can't just check the length of the post queue. That gives misleading results, shall we say. And we can just do a console.log saying queue as plus queue size plus elements. Okay. And then if the queue size is greater than 0, we have to deal with it. Okay. And again, we can use the keys thing. So we can do for var k in the post queue. So this is a for loop that goes through for every k in the post queue. It does something. And the thing that it does is it sends the post, is my idea, but we can't quite guarantee that yet because arrays are also objects in JavaScript, and sometimes there are attributes in there that we didn't set, which makes it all very confusing. So what you've got to do is check that post queue dot has the own property of k, which checks that it is actually a property of this object and not any of the prototypes that were used to create the object. So it is one of my fields as an object. And if that's all true, then we send the post and we just get the element out of the post queue that matches that key, and we use the key as the user ID. So if you remember, when we added, we just treated this like an associative array. So we put the user ID into the user ID, the unique ID element of the array, we set the message string. So now we're getting it out, we're getting the message and the unique ID in a loop that goes through all the keys that are in that post queue. So for all the keys in the post queue, we check that the key is actually a property of this object, and if it is, then we post that message out. And that's us for check and send. Check for messages in queue and sends. Okay, except it's not send, it's this new method here, which is do send post. Okay. Last thing we have to do is take things out. So whenever we get the reply from the server, okay, so here's a reply from our server. What we have to do at this point is remove the item from the queue. So that's a bit tricky. First of all, we can have two types of response from the server. The server can respond with an error or with a number. So if is not a number, the HTTP dot response text. So if the response text is not a number, then we've had an error. And if we've had an error, we may as well just console.log error from server. Okay. Otherwise, it is just a number. So the response text is just a number. So we'll assume that's the validation ID. And what we'll try to do now is delete from the post queue the element with ID equal to the response text. So the simple idea is when we get that back, we use that as the key to the array to delete it from the array. And we can just confirm that removed item plus http.response text. Boom. There you go. And I think that's us. Yep, we'll set it up to check regularly. We'll set it up to check as soon as we've posted. Yep, so it's going to check and send immediately. If that doesn't happen, so if something goes wrong here and it gets missed, then it will try again 5 seconds later. But that's okay because the server is making sure that there's no duplicates. I won't check 5 seconds later, I'll check on its 5-second intervals. When we do a check and send, we take it out, we get each element that's in the queue, we fire it off, and when we get a response back from the server, if it's a number, we remove that item from the queue. Let's give that a try. Oh, let's turn on the debugging, Control-Shift-I. Empty cache and reload just to be paranoid. I've deleted some of the test posts from last time from the database to make this a bit clearer. And I'm just going to do test new. Oh, spelling mistake there. I suppose I should JSLint this. Where is my nan? There it is. Anything else? That's the complaint about. Oh yeah, JavaScript's got this issue that very confusingly for Java programmers, that K is actually in scope from the beginning of the method. So it's a bad idea to have var declarations inside because it gives you a feeling as a Java programmer that you're scoped by the curly brackets, by the block, whereas in JavaScript you're scoped by function. So that's actually in view from there, and JSLint doesn't like that. So we'll fix that, though it's not really a bug. Test new 2. There we go. And if we look at the queue that we've got in the console, the queue has one element. It posted the message. It got the reply of the number. It removed that item from the posts. We're now going around the loop every few seconds, and it's saying it's got 0 elements in the queue. So that says. You might want to refine that. I try every 5 seconds to repost it. You might keep a counter so that you give up after 10 retries or 20 retries or an hour. What do you do when a failure happens? Do you alert the user to it? At the moment, we just fail quiet. We just keep trying forever until the user closes their, if they close the app, it'll stop. You might want a more intelligent approach where you try 10 times, or you try for a while and then you warn the user. You might even post it into the messages frame with a little warning triangle beside it saying that it's not synced yet, and then keep trying. You might want to type, instead of a fixed every 5 seconds, it might be worth slowing that down so that over time you try less frequently, just to reduce load on the processor and the batteries and attempted network attempts. But yeah, apart from that, it's a simple working version that guarantees if the message got lost on the way over here, or we didn't get the acknowledgement back, then we would just resend it until it was acknowledged. And the server is ignoring duplicate copies, so we're safe that nothing duplicated will end up on the server, and it will eventually get taken out of the list if we get a network connection. So next time, we're going to try and make this look a bit like a mobile app. Code's all on the web, tinyurl.com/UOS317.